Undead and Married is a romantic vampire cozy mystery and is book one in Andy Lowe's Blood Bond Agency series. The series is published by Squabbling Sparrows Press and is also available in ebook and paperback.
Chapter 5. Eva read through Dominik's completed questionnaire for what felt like the umpteenth time, still unable to believe his answers. And yet she had to. He'd used the fountain pen, so unless he was being protected by magic, he'd told the truth, and nothing but the truth. The strength of the blood ink was such that respondents filled out details they'd prefer to keep quiet, truths that should never see the light of day. It was yet another reason to be nervous that there had been a potential break-in. The secrets held in the crypt were the kind to kick off wars. Those same secrets had kept the family safe for hundreds of years, an insurance policy against hurt if you like. Eva tapped the completed form with her own pen. It says here that you've used the services of Love Bites. Despite wanting to grill him about the vetting process over there, she nibbled her lip. She didn't want to appear as nosy as Lilith had earlier, and part of her didn't want to know what went on, full stop. The rumors were bad enough, with wild tales of bloodletting orgies involving the young and innocent. No self-respecting female vampire would have anything to do with the place. It was more the haunt of male vampires with little or no morals, hungry for blood no matter the willingness of the donor. Or should that be the victim? That Count Zilonka could have taken part in such practices made her top lip curl and her incisors extend of their own volition. "Relax, would you?" said Dominik in an instant. "It was that sort of behavior that stopped me from using their services. I don't need to take donors by force." Eva's hackles were now well and truly up. How did he know what she was thinking? She still had her energy shield in place. He shouldn't be able to read her thoughts. "Are you serious?" Dominik exploded with laughter, only continuing when his mirth was under control. "I didn't need to read your energy to see what was going on inside your head. Your expression and your incisors said it all." He didn't give Eva a chance to retract them before he continued. "It didn't take me long to get what that place was all about. They kept setting me up with humans, and while they can be sweet, the longevity isn't there." Eva's eyes widened. Sweet? Longevity? Could she be right, and it was their newest client who was behind the dead backpackers? Part of her now wished she'd kept her office door open. Even eavesdroppers were better than being locked inside what amounted to a mahogany coffin with a natural-born killer. For the love of blood. Dominik shot to his feet, with Eva matching him. Rather than jumping over the desk and attacking her, he swung around and opened the door wide. This surprised both Didi and Lilith, who had been hard up against it, for all the good it would do them. Given his lack of reaction, he knew they were there. This left Eva unsure if he opened the door to reveal their presence or to put her at ease. Ignoring the nosy pair, he retook his seat, with Eva doing likewise. "Any relationships I've had in the past have ended because of the age of the girl." After a brief pause, he'd pressed on. Perhaps girl isn't the best description of a woman in her 90s. Okay, so it didn't look as if he was killing off backpackers for kicks. And for a vampire to stick with a human until they attained old age was rare. As a species, vampires didn't have compassion or loyalty toward humans. He was proving more of an anomaly all the time. Eva again scanned his application form, taking special note of his flamboyant signature at the bottom of the last page. "You really are after a blood bond?" Even knowing his answers were correct courtesy of the bespelled ink, she was having trouble believing her own eyes. Her questioning him yet again pushed him over the edge. He stormed to his feet and out of her office, causing the other two to scatter. "You have my details." The glare that followed was enough to have her withering inside. She wasn't given the opportunity to apologize because he was gone, moving so fast Eva wasn't able to track him. Only the front door closing said he'd exited the building. At least she thought he had. She dropped the shield of energy she'd been using as a means of protection. A quick scan of the building found no trace of him, other than the fizz his magnetic personality had left in her office. She would have searched outside, but her energy had its limits. It was also better she kept her abilities to herself. It was something Georgia had drummed into her, from when she first gained the ability as a child. And her grandmother had never led her wrong in the past. It was Lilith who broke the silence. "Whoa, he is hot with a capital H." Didi also commented on Dominik's looks. However, it wasn't to praise them, rather her words were halting. "I thought it was Lysander." She then shut her eyes as if thinking back on the past. "While I've seen photos of the Count and knew there was an uncanny resemblance, that's the first time I've met him. His energy was unnerving. For a moment, I thought the love of George's life walked again." Okay, so that explained why the woman had gone as white as she had. Even now, she was on edge, something so at odds with her usual confidence as to have Eva also jumpy. "Come on. Let's see his answers." Lilith had a hold of the clipboard, although not for long after Eva smacked the back of her hand. "What would Georgia say if she saw you helping yourself like that?" It was an accusation that had the young vampire holding her hands up in surrender. Fine, no deadly secrets. Only the juicy bits. Even Georgia shares those." Eva picked up the clipboard and flicked her gaze over Dominik's answers until she found something she could share. "It says here he's sick of playing the part of toy boy to human mates. He wants to be set up with a nice vampire instead." Lilith, who was now ensconced in the visitor's chair, guffawed. "You sure about that? I didn't get any settled down vibes off him." She even drew quote marks in the air to emphasize her opinion. Not one to keep quiet, Didi offered her own theory. "I'm with her. Nothing about that boy says to me he's in the market for a wife. Are you sure he didn't tell you what you wanted to hear? It's not possible. He used the fountain pen with George's blood ink. It has to be the truth. Doesn't it?" Never had Eva doubted the veracity of the blood ink, to get to the core. Lilith leaned in as Dominik had earlier, although there was no wave of energy as before. "Go on, what else does it say?" Eva scanned the rest of the form. "He's after a good bond to strengthen the family's bloodlines." Here at least was a typical vampire-born response, and one Eva had overheard on many an occasion. It was the next answer that gave her pause. "He said he wants a mate he can count on to be his friend." Didi gave into an unladylike sniff. How very un-Zilonka-like of him. I'll bet he hasn't shared that with the nasty pit of vipers that rules his lot. The receptionist stared off into space for a second or two, as if to get her thoughts in order. And why was he filling out the form and not her? The woman is a control freak. The receptionist had the right of it, and yet Eva had no way of knowing if Dominik was lying about that or not. He hadn't hesitated to sign the contract, stating he had the power to complete the bond on behalf of the Zilonka clan. In the end, Eva escorted her two offsiders out of the office. She needed to work on matches for Count Zilonka, and she couldn't do that with them gossiping about the reputation of their newest client. Georgia would have a fit if she caught them at it. Thankfully, her grandmother wasn't there. If she were, she would insist Eva complete the match the old-fashioned way to practice. As it was, Eva had no intention of tapping into the woo-woo employed by Georgia. Why bother when she had technology at her fingertips? Eva took her laptop out of the bottom drawer of George's desk, unable to stop glancing around, as though being observed. As with their internal security system, Lilith had developed a state-of-the-art program designed to match vampires. It was as far as you could get from the esoteric, feel-the-force technique favored by Georgia as possible. The V-Match program analyzed personal preferences, personalities, and which clans may join in matrimony. Even better was that Lilith had set in place alerts so that if anyone in the database was blood bonded or died for real, she'd know about it. The same went for any new turns they came across, meaning the contents were as current as social media and international news would allow. It didn't matter that the Welsh girl still had to update the database the old-fashioned way. It was safer than Eva trusting her own innate ability to sense the right vampires to be introduced to each other. If she were to follow that talent, she and the delectable hemophite who had just left would exchange vows that afternoon. Their babies would be gorgeous. A closer look at his answers showed him to be her perfect match on so many levels as to be eerie. It was a pity a match between them was impossible, thanks to the animosity between Natalia and Georgia. There was also the rule that was in place since Georgia founded the agency. Never mix business with pleasure. And with pleasure, Eva suspected Dominik was the business. He'd had enough practice, if the gossip columns were to be believed. Chapter 6.
After storming out of the building, Dominik did everything he could to calm himself. It was exactly as his cousin Magda and her husband Luca had said. Eva De Silva was one hell of a woman. Tall, willowy, and breathtakingly beautiful, but with an innate strength that spoke to him, and not just physically. Unfortunately, he also suspected she was behind the recent string of murders. Which was a hell of a shame, as she did it for him as no other human or vampire before her. It had been as if electricity coursed through him when he sat opposite her, his body shaking, as if he was about to take flight. There had been a strange connection, too, as if his soul was tethered to hers, with him able to sense her presence in his very core. He'd never felt the like before, and he wanted to savor the moment, even though all the evidence pointed to her being the murderer. Despite him getting no bad vibes from her, the clues spoke for themselves. It was a pity that the same wasn't true for the victims. Whoever killed them had drained the 5 young women to the point they were reduced to skin and bones. They hadn't died thanks to a botched turning, or being attacked by one in the throes of bloodlust. And anyway, it was rare for a vampire to drain a human, if even by accident. Even a newbie vampire would have drunk their fill long before they left a body in that condition. Maybe there was more than one murderer. If the 3 women he'd just left put their minds to it, they could certainly drink a human dry. The one thing he was sure of was that the murderer was not a nouveau. Such was their self-esteem that they'd do anything to lay claim to offspring, bolstering their fragile egos as if forming their own clan strengthened them. Dominik again went over his meeting with Eva. She was an enigma, all right, one he found fascinating, and that was before she'd blocked him. This gave him pause. It was unusual for anyone outside of the Zilonka clan to have the power to do this. Dominik unlocked his car and climbed in, sitting in the dark, allowing his thoughts to meander where they would. He wasn't unhappy their destination was the silver-haired beauty he'd just left. Knowing my luck, it'll turn out we're related. The only outsider he knew who could control energy like that was the witch, Frankie Bonnie. And even then, this was down to her merging energies with him, Magda and Luca, while they were healing the merman Zane. After starting the car, he pulled away, even sticking to the limits when out of the city. The last thing he needed was to be stopped for speeding. Although with his ability to control humans, the chances of him getting a ticket or being arrested were slim. Still, it was better to avoid attention until after he'd taken care of his little murderess. It wasn't until he was close to Castle Ration, and his home for the time being, that he thought back on that questionnaire. If he didn't know better, he'd say there was something magical about it. It had taken all his willpower to fill the form in as he'd wanted to, his head having to overrule his heart with every question. The last thing he needed was for that silver-haired minx to know his innermost secrets. Therein lay madness. Perhaps the biggest lie, he may as well call it what it was the one about Natalia giving him permission to seek his own mate. It would be a chilly day in hell when he wrested control away from that one. His shout of laughter filled the car. Thanks to Frankie Bonnie having locked Natalia away nice and tight at All Hallows Keep, hell was currently experiencing a cold snap. His mirth then gave way to a more chilling scenario. Perhaps he'd been telling the truth after all, because with Natalia out of the picture, he was free to choose his own mate. He'd not even started up the main staircase at the castle when he was confronted by Magda and Luca, eager to see how he'd gotten on. After peering at him, Luca had raised an eyebrow. Meanwhile, Magda shook her head and tisked. "Uh-oh. I know this look. She's got you stake, heart, and mallet, hasn't she?" Her laughter had a tinkling quality to it that, while pretty, did nothing to soothe Dominik. Them having grown up together, there was nothing he could hide from his cousin and vice versa. Before Magda and her husband were blood bonded, Luca would have been in the dark about what he and his cousin were discussing. Once the blood price was paid and the blood bond completed, they functioned as one. It was the one thing that put Dominik off being bound in matrimony. He'd be vulnerable on so many levels, with his innermost thoughts as an open book to his mate. Perhaps the biggest concern was that unless his mate died at his hands, when they passed, he would perish too. Some said it was of a broken heart, but Dominik wasn't sure. On the plus side, it meant he hadn't needed to update the handsome vampire sitting next to his cousin. The man already knew what his mate referred to. And blasted if Magda wasn't right. Even with Eva blocking his energy, she'd hooked into him in a big way. And he was never a fan of long-distance relationships. Which is what it'd be, because unless you knew how to access All Hallows Keep, just visiting was problematic. Add to this, the prisoners being held in a state of suspended animation, and any visits would be quiet indeed. Magda glanced away from the love of her life only long enough to ask, "So, apart from her being attractive, is she guilty?" Dominik shook his head, before giving voice to his response. I'm not sure." "You're not sure?" Magda stared at him, shock marring her beauty. "You got it. I tried checking out her energy signature, but she blocked me." Magda surged to her feet, fangs extended, the muscles in her neck corded. "She blocked you? But this is not possible. Only a Zilonka can do this. I knew it was a mistake for you to visit that establishment. What if the news of Natalia gets out?" Ignoring his wife's histrionics and list of what-ifs, Luka put into words what Dominik had puzzled over on the return journey. "And what if she is? A Zilonka, that is." So shocking was this theory that Magda ran out of worries and dropped to the couch in a boneless heap. If not for Luka's quick reflexes, she'd have slid to the floor. Dominik couldn't blame his cousin, he felt the same way.
If you've enjoyed these chapters, we'd love it if you could give them a thumbs up. And if you'd like to continue the story, you can subscribe and tap the bell to be notified when the next chapter is released.